My nephew Tyler's high school graduation reception was held in the school's gymnasium, transformed with blue and gold streamers, balloon arches and long tables covered in white cloths. Proud parents clustered in groups, congratulating each other while graduates posed for photos near a makeshift backdrop. The air smelled of cafeteria coffee and sheet cake, mixed with expensive perfume and cologne. I stood near the refreshment table, a cup of lukewarm punch in my hand, watching my sister Amanda work the crowd like a seasoned politician. At 42, she was polished and put together in her designer navy dress and heels that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd always known how to command a room. I, at 45, preferred to observe from the periphery. My simple gray dress was professional but understated. No flashy jewelry except the small pearl earrings my grandmother had given me. I'd learned long ago that it was easier to stay invisible at family events than to fight for recognition I'd never receive. "Oh, that's my older sister Jennifer," Amanda said when a cluster of well-dressed parents approached our family's designated area. She gestured vaguely in my direction without really looking at me. "She works at the courthouse downtown. Does boring paperwork, filing, processing forms, clerical stuff. Very steady work." Sympathetic nods rippled through the group like a wave. One mother, dripping in diamonds, touched Amanda's arm with practiced pity. "Well, at least she has job security, right? Government benefits are good." "Exactly." Amanda's laugh was bright and slightly condescending. "I keep telling her she should aim higher, try to advance, but she's been doing the same thing for 8 years now?" She glanced at me for confirmation, not really expecting an answer. "Some people just aren't driven. They're comfortable with mediocrity." She smoothed her dress with perfectly manicured hands. "I just made senior partner at Morrison & Hayes. Youngest partner in the firm's 60-year history. My corner office has the most amazing view of the harbor." Polite applause scattered through the group. My parents, standing a few feet away, beamed at Amanda with undisguised pride. My mother actually wiped a tear from her eye. "Amanda has always been exceptional," my father added, his chest puffed out. "We always knew she'd do great things." I sipped my punch, the artificial fruit flavor coating my tongue. The familiar sting of invisibility settled over me like an old, worn blanket. 8 years of this. 8 years of letting them believe their comfortable narrative because correcting them had proven pointless. Then a man in an obviously expensive charcoal suit stepped forward from the back of the group. I recognized him immediately. Richard Walsh, one of the top divorce attorneys in the state. I'd seen him in my courtroom dozens of times. He was studying me with narrowed, assessing eyes. "Wait a minute," he said slowly, his brow furrowed. "Jennifer, is it?" Amanda looked slightly annoyed at the interruption of her spotlight moment. "Yes, that's my sister. Like I said, she does administrative work at the courthouse. Nothing exciting." "I'm not asking you," Walsh said, his tone sharp and professional. He kept his gaze fixed on me. "I'm asking her. What do you actually do at the courthouse?" The question hung in the air. Amanda's smile faltered slightly. My parents looked confused by the intensity in his voice. "Like I just explained," Amanda said with forced patience, "she files paperwork. Processes documents. Administrative support staff." "Let her answer," Walsh insisted, taking a step closer to me. Recognition was dawning in his eyes, mixing with what looked like horror. "What is your actual position?" I met his gaze directly. After 8 years of silence, of letting assumptions stand unchallenged, I said 2 words clearly and calmly. "Family court judge." The silence was immediate, profound, and absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that crowded gymnasium. Conversations at nearby tables died mid-sentence. Even the background music from the cheap speakers seemed to fade away. My sister's face drained of all color, going from healthy tan to paper white in seconds. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water, but no sound came out. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips, suspended in midair. My father actually stumbled backward, grabbing a chair for support. "You're Judge Harrison?" Walsh's voice rose with recognition and something like awe. "You're Judge Jennifer Harrison of the 4th District Family Court?" I nodded once. "Oh my God." Walsh turned to address the stunned group of parents. "Judge Harrison presided over my biggest case this year, the Henderson custody battle. It was incredibly complex. Involved interstate jurisdiction issues, allegations of abuse, competing psychological evaluations. Her ruling was absolutely brilliant. It's being cited in appellate briefs across 3 states. Amanda made a small choking sound. Her perfect composure was cracking like ice under pressure. Judge Harrison has revolutionized our family court system, Walsh continued, his professional respect overriding any social awkwardness. She implemented trauma-informed practices for children testifying in custody cases. She reduced the case backlog by 40% through innovative scheduling and mediation programs. Her child welfare decisions are being used as teaching examples in law school curricula at Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. The diamond-wearing mother's hand had dropped from Amanda's arm. She was staring at me with wide eyes. "A judge?" my mother finally whispered, her voice trembling. "You're a judge? An actual judge?" "For 8 years," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "Since I was 37. I was appointed by the governor. I told you. At my swearing-in ceremony. You said you couldn't attend because Amanda had an important work presentation." My father's face had gone from pale to flushed red. "But you said, when we asked about your work, you said you dealt with paperwork." "I do," I replied evenly. "Case files, legal briefs, custody evaluations, court orders, appellate decisions. Hundreds of pages every single day. You assumed that meant filing. I clarified once. You didn't hear me. I stopped trying. The governor appointed you." One of the other fathers spoke up, clearly impressed. "That's a political appointment. Those are incredibly competitive." "She was the youngest family court judge in state history at the time," Walsh added. "It was in all the legal journals. The Bar Association gave her a standing ovation." Amanda's tears started then, silent at first, just wet tracks down her carefully made-up face, then building into quiet sobs that shook her shoulders. Her mascara began to run, creating dark streaks that ruined her perfect appearance. "Judge Harrison also chairs the State Committee on Juvenile Justice Reform," Walsh continued, seemingly unable to stop now that he'd started. "She's published extensively in legal journals. Last year she gave the keynote address at the National Council of Family Court Judges. Her speech on protecting children's rights in high-conflict divorces received a standing ovation from over 2,000 judges." 2,000 judges, my mother repeated faintly as if she couldn't process the number. The other parents were looking at my family now with expressions ranging from shock to disapproval to outright disgust. One mother whispered something to her husband, shaking her head. Tyler, my nephew, the graduate whose day this was supposed to be, had appeared at the edge of the group. He looked confused and hurt. "Aunt Jennifer is a judge? I didn't know that. Why didn't anyone tell me?" "We didn't know either, sweetie," my mother said weakly. "How could you not know?" Walsh's voice carried judgment now. "It's public information. Her cases are reported in the news. Her name is on court documents. Her photo is on the courthouse website. We thought." My father started, then stopped, seeming to realize how terrible any explanation would sound. "You thought your daughter was a clerk for 8 years and never once asked for details?" one of the other mothers said, her voice cold. "Never attended a single work event? Never showed any interest?" Amanda collapsed into a chair, her hands covering her face, shoulders heaving with sobs. Her moment of triumph, youngest partner, corner office, Harborview, had been utterly destroyed. "I bragged about my promotion," she whispered between sobs. "I called you mediocre. Oh God, what have I done?" "You believed what was comfortable," I said simply. "What fit the narrative you preferred. The successful younger sister and the disappointing older one who never lived up to her potential." "But we love you," my mother insisted, tears now flowing freely down her own face. "We're your family." "Are you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. Family shows interest. Family asks questions. Family celebrates achievements. You've been celebrating Amanda's career milestones for 8 years while I've been making decisions that affect children's lives, breaking cycles of abuse, and reforming a broken system. And you thought I was filing papers. Walsh shook his head slowly. "Judge Harrison handles some of the most difficult cases in our legal system. She makes life-or-death decisions about child safety. She's reunited families and protected children from harm. The legal community holds her in the highest respect. I settled a case last week, I continued, my voice quiet but carrying across the now silent gymnasium. A 7-year-old boy who'd been passed between foster homes for 3 years. I finalized his adoption to a family who'd been fighting for him. He drew me a picture. It's on my desk. That's what I do. That's who I am. Jennifer, please. My father stepped forward, his hands outstretched. We didn't know. How could we have known if you didn't tell us? I did tell you, I said firmly. At the swearing-in you didn't attend. At Christmas dinner when I mentioned a landmark ruling, you changed the subject to Amanda's client acquisition numbers. At Thanksgiving when I talked about the Juvenile Justice Committee, you interrupted to discuss Amanda's bonus. I sent you the newspaper article when I was profiled as one of the state's most influential jurists. None of you mentioned it. The weight of 8 years of indifference settled over the gymnasium like fog. Your Honor, Walsh said formally now, I apologize for not recognizing you out of context. And I apologize on behalf of the legal profession that your own family doesn't understand your significance. That's not your burden to carry, Mr. Walsh, I said gently. I set down my punch cup on the table with a soft click. Tyler, congratulations on your graduation. You should be proud of your accomplishments. I am. My nephew's eyes were wet. Thank you, Aunt Jennifer. I wish I'd known about what you do. It's really cool. It matters to me, I said simply. I picked up my purse from the chair. Amanda was still sobbing, her perfect image shattered along with her perfect day. My parents stood frozen, finally seeing me, but too late, far too late. Don't leave, my mother pleaded. Please. We need to talk about this. We need to understand. There's nothing to understand, Mom, I said, exhaustion creeping into my voice. You made assumptions based on what you wanted to believe. The successful daughter and the disappointing one. It was easier than actually knowing both of us. But you never insisted, my father protested weakly. You just let us believe. I got tired, I interrupted. Tired of competing for attention I'd never receive. Tired of watching you celebrate Amanda's every achievement while ignoring mine. It was easier to disappear than to keep begging to be seen. One of the mothers in the group spoke up. For what it's worth, Judge Harrison, what you do is remarkable. My sister went through a terrible custody battle. The judge who handled it changed her children's lives. Thank you for the work you do. I nodded my appreciation. That's why I do it. Not for recognition. But it would have been nice if my family had at least asked. I walked toward the gymnasium exit, my heels clicking on the polished floor. Behind me, I could hear Amanda's continued sobbing, my mother's desperate pleas, Walsh's voice explaining to the other parents about case law and judicial impact. In the parking lot, the late afternoon sun was warm on my face. My phone buzzed. A text from my clerk about an emergency custody hearing scheduled for Monday morning. A 3-year-old removed from a dangerous situation, placement needed immediately. Real work. Important work. Work that mattered. I got in my car and drove away from the school, away from my family's belated recognition, away from 8 years of being invisible finally exposed to light. They'd seen my title now. My position. My achievements. But they'd never really seen me. Never asked about the difficult decisions that kept me awake at night, the children whose faces I carried home, the small victories that made the heartbreak worthwhile. Some families celebrate together. Others build walls of assumption and comfortable lies. Mine had finally seen the truth. But I was done waiting for them to care about it. Monday morning I'd be back in my courtroom making decisions that mattered, protecting children who needed someone to see them. Being seen by the people who mattered most. The families I served, the children I protected, the legal community that respected my work. That was enough. Had to be enough. Because after 45 years I'd finally learned. You can't make people see you if they've chosen to look away.